A horse box for the gospel. It had to be big enough to sleep 5 children and 2 adults, strong enough to carry 5 tons of marquee and equipment, and still have enough space for at least 1 month's food for a team of 20. Horses are big and heavy and need something pretty strong to transport them and their owners, so obviously a horse box was what was needed, so Pops made a list. Second-hand Bedford TL 7.5T, £5,000. New box sleeping 7 with provision for all the mission equipment, £10,000. Total, £15,000. Answer: sell house in Leamington, buy cheaper house in Liverpool. Remaining money, £15,000. Job done. Although maybe none of the church in Leamington got to travel in the new horse box, Pops and Nana knew that without their prayers and sacrifice, the move from Leamington to Liverpool would never have happened. Pops believes it was in Southtown Church that the Holy Spirit separated him and Nana to the work he had called them to. Many of these little stories happened because of the faithful and sacrificial lives of their friends. One of the first missions the Bedford took part in was taking aid to some of the churches in Romania that had been persecuted under the dictator Ceausescu. Pops and his 2 very good friends, Mickey and Terry, visited about 7 churches around Romania, distributing food, clothes, Bibles and money. One church had been praying for money so they could put windows in their building. They had been meeting for years, summer and winter, without any windows and with very little heating. Winter temperatures can go down to minus 25 degrees. When Terry gave all the dollars that had been given from the churches in Liverpool, there were lots of tears, hugs and kisses, and Romanians really know how to hug and kiss. It was an experience that was new to Pops and his friends. All 3 would get 2 kisses on both cheeks and 1 full on the lips by all the pastors of the churches. It was also decided that Pops' eldest son would marry the pastor's eldest daughter. Pops would supply the tent for the outdoor ceremony, and the pastor would supply the goat for the wedding feast. But the 2 young people had other plans and it never happened. Shame. Pops was looking forward to eating roast goat in his marquee, but he had to admit the kissing may have gotten a little out of hand. Every morning the 3 amigos would discuss who would be the driver that day, but when it was time to fire up the Bedford, it seemed Pops forgot what had been decided, plonked himself in the driving seat and off they would go. Mickey and Terry miraculously are still some of Pops' closest and very gracious friends. A lady called Jo wrote a song about how a young man wouldn't let his best friends play with his new toy. It's called Driving Dave's Lorry, a classic. The Romanian orphanages were soon discovered, where thousands of Ceausescu babies had been taken from their parents, who had been encouraged to have as many children as possible to build up the nation's population and armed forces. When the parents couldn't feed their children anymore, because most of the food grown in Romania was transported to Moscow, they were taken away from them and placed in orphanages all over the country. Some of the conditions the children were living in reminded Pops of his time working in the zoo, but the smell of stale milk, soiled clothes and filthy beds was far worse. Those children old enough to stand would just rock and back and forth in their cots all day. On one such aid trip, Pops was with men from Liverpool who would call themselves hard men, who seemed unmoved when every morning he would give a short talk on the love of God. But when they witnessed these children, most of them broke down in uncontrollable sobbing. Pops has learnt later that some of them became Christians. Driving home again on the autobahns through Germany, Pops was in his own little world. He couldn't drive and talk at the same time as he got confused, but he could pray. He asked the Lord, "Should I keep concentrating on taking aid?" The Lord answered very clearly, "Your main mission is to take the gospel. The gospel is the only thing that can change a nation, so preach the gospel." So that's what Pops did.